They poured a $600 bottle of wine on him in front of 200 people, laughed while it soaked through his suit, called him a nobody who didn't belong. What they didn't know, he owned the company, every single share. And in his pocket was the contract they'd been celebrating all night, the one about to make them millions. He walked out without saying a word. But before he reached his car, he made one phone call that destroyed everything they'd built. This is the true story of the night a billionaire was treated like trash and the 60 seconds that changed everything. If you've ever been underestimated, disrespected, or judged by how you look, you need to hear what happens next.
Stay with me.
Because the moment he closes that door at the end, it'll give you chills. Let's begin. Welcome to Reality Stories Hub. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. You know those moments when you walk into a room and you can just feel it? That thick air of money and pride mixing together like expensive perfume that's been sprayed too many times? That's exactly what the Royal Gardens Hotel felt like on that Saturday evening in downtown Chicago. Let me tell you about Daniel Brooks. Now, Daniel wasn't the type of man who needed to announce himself when he entered a room. He wore a simple black suit, the kind you could pick up from any decent store. His watch was steel, not gold. His shoes were polished but not flashy. Everything about him whispered quiet confidence, but in a room full of people shouting their wealth, whispers get ignored. Daniel owned the largest renewable energy company in the Midwest. Solar farms that stretched for miles. Wind turbines spinning across 3 states. He had built an empire from the ground up, starting with nothing but a college degree and a dream to make clean energy accessible to everyone. But tonight, he wasn't here to brag about any of that. He was here for one reason: to finalize a partnership deal worth $600 million with Silverstone Tech Industries. The ballroom glowed with golden light from chandeliers that probably cost more than most people's houses. Round tables covered in white silk cloths held crystal glasses and plates that sparkled under the lights. Men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns moved through the crowd like peacocks, stopping every few steps to take selfies or check their phones. Everyone wanted proof they were in the room where it happened. At the center of all this celebration stood Silverstone Tech's logo on massive screens. The company's CEO, Brandon Silverstone, had been talking for weeks about this mystery partner who was going to change everything. The deal was the talk of the industry. $600 million. Jobs for thousands. Technology that could revolutionize how cities powered themselves. Daniel walked through the main entrance and immediately felt the shift. The security guard at the door looked him up and down with narrowed eyes, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't fit. "Excuse me, sir," the guard said, stepping forward with one hand raised. "Are you with the catering company?" Daniel smiled gently. He had expected this. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a black invitation card with silver embossed letters. The guard's face went red as he read it, then stepped aside quickly without another word. Inside, the energy was the same. Daniel moved slowly through the crowd, his hands relaxed at his sides, watching everything. He noticed how people glanced at him and then away, like he was furniture they had to navigate around. A group of women in sparkling dresses shifted their expensive handbags to the other shoulder as he passed, as if protecting their belongings from a stranger. At the bar, Daniel waited patiently for the bartender's attention. A man in a white tuxedo cut directly in front of him, not even looking his way. "Champagne," the man ordered, then glanced at Daniel and smirked. "Oh, sorry, buddy. Staff should probably use the back bar, right?" Daniel simply stepped to the side and ordered a glass of water when his turn came. No argument. No explanation. He had learned long ago that some battles aren't worth fighting with words. Near the stage, a microphone squealed to life. The host, a man with perfect hair and a smile that looked practiced in mirrors, began speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Silverstone Tech Celebration Gala." Applause erupted like a wave. Daniel stayed near a tall marble column, close enough to see the stage, but far enough to remain unnoticed.
He preferred it this way.
Watching, listening, learning who these people really were when they thought no one important was paying attention. The host continued, his voice booming with false excitement. Tonight, we celebrate a partnership that will change our city forever. $600 million invested in our future. The crowd cheered. Phones lifted into the air, recording the moment for social media posts that would flood the internet within minutes. Then she appeared. Catherine Silverstone, Brandon's wife, stepped onto the stage in a dress that seemed to be made of liquid gold. She moved like someone who had never been told no in her entire life. Her smile was bright white and perfectly calculated. She waved at the crowd like a queen greeting her subjects. Beside her stood Brandon, the CEO himself, in a suit that probably cost what most people made in 6 months. His hair was slicked back, his jaw strong, his entire presence screaming success and power. The room worshipped them. Every eye locked on that stage. Every person in that ballroom wanted to be them, to stand where they stood, to have what they had. Every person except one. Daniel stood quietly by his column, arms crossed loosely, face calm. He wasn't impressed by the lights or the speeches or the performance. He had come here to do business with people he thought were serious professionals. What he was seeing now made him wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. But he decided to wait, to observe a little longer, to give them a chance to show him who they really were. And oh, they were about to show him exactly that. The whispers started before Daniel even moved from his spot by the column. In rooms like this, nothing spreads faster than judgment. You ever notice how people talk about you like you're not even there? Like you're invisible? That's what started happening to Daniel as he stood in that grand ballroom, just watching, just waiting. A woman in a red dress leaned toward her friend, speaking behind her hand, but not nearly as quietly as she thought. See that guy over there? By the column? He keeps showing up in the VIP section. I think he might be lost. Her friend giggled, sipping champagne. Maybe he's trying to network his way into a job. Bold move, but kind of sad, you know? Daniel heard every word. His face didn't change. He had dealt with assumptions his whole life. Growing up in a rough neighborhood on the South Side, people always assumed things about him. What he could do, where he belonged, what he deserved. He had learned to let their words slide off like water off glass. But tonight felt different. Tonight, he was their partner. Their equal. At least, that's what the contract said. He moved away from the column, walking slowly toward the front where he could see the stage better. As he walked, more eyes found him. More whispers followed. A server carrying a tray of wine glasses passed by him. A guest tapped her on the shoulder and whispered loud enough for Daniel to hear, "Is that guy supposed to be here? He looks like he's trying to blend in with the guests." The server looked uncomfortable.
I don't know, ma'am.
"I just served the drinks." The guest nodded knowingly. "Well, someone should probably check on him. This is a private event." Daniel kept walking. He found a spot near the side of the room where he could stand without blocking anyone's view. The stage was in full view now. Brandon and Catherine stood there like royalty, soaking in the attention, loving every second of it. Then Catherine saw him. Her eyes locked onto Daniel, and something changed in her expression. Her smile turned into something else. Something sharp. She leaned over to her husband and whispered something in his ear, her lips barely moving. Brandon's eyes followed her gaze until they landed on Daniel. Brandon's eyebrows dropped. His smile faded just a bit. He whispered something back to his wife, then stepped down from the stage with that fake friendliness that rich people use when they're about to embarrass someone. Daniel watched him approach. He didn't move.
Didn't flinch.
Just stood there with his hands loosely at his sides, waiting. Brandon walked right up to him, smiling that practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey there, friend," he said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Daniel's voice came out calm and steady. "I'm exactly where I need to be." Brandon chuckled, looking around at the small crowd that had started to gather, sensing drama. Right. But see, this section is for special guests only. The general event area is downstairs. Easy mistake to make. "I'm not mistaken," Daniel replied simply. Brandon's smile tightened. He reached out and tapped Daniel's shoulder like he was brushing off dust. "Look, man, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but you can't just walk into VIP because you want to. There are rules. Someone in the crowd snickered. A man whispered to his date, "This is awkward." Another voice said, "Security should have caught him at the door." Brandon snapped his fingers at a passing server. "Hey, can you help this gentleman find his way to the appropriate area? He seems a little confused." The server looked terrified, caught between a powerful CEO and a calm stranger who didn't seem bothered at all. Before the server could respond, Catherine walked over, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. She picked up a glass of red wine from a nearby table without asking whose it was. She looked Daniel up and down like he was something she found on the bottom of her shoe. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "if you needed work tonight, the staffing agency has applications. But pretending to be a guest? That's not going to get you hired. That's going to get you escorted out." Daniel said nothing. His silence seemed to irritate her more than any words could have. Catherine stepped closer, holding the wine glass up between them. "I'm serious. Take this to table 7. They've been waiting." She pushed the glass toward his chest. When Daniel didn't reach for it, her face changed. The fake sweetness melted away, leaving only cold annoyance. "Are you listening to me?" she demanded. Brandon took the glass from her hand, holding it high. He looked around at the crowd that had gathered, phones out, recording everything. He wanted an audience. He wanted people to see him put someone in their place. "Let me make this clear," Brandon said loudly. "This is my event. My company. My night. And people who don't belong here need to learn their place." Then he tilted the glass. Red wine poured out in a smooth stream, splashing across Daniel's suit jacket, soaking into the fabric, dripping down onto his shirt and tie. The sound of liquid hitting cloth seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence that followed. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Someone said, "Oh my God." Another voice whispered, "He actually did it." Phones recorded from every angle. Camera flashes went off. The crowd pressed closer, wanting to see the humiliation up close. Catherine laughed, quiet and cruel. "Maybe now you'll understand where you stand." Daniel stood perfectly still. A drop of wine rolled down his jaw. He lifted one hand slowly, wiping it away with his thumb. Then he straightened his jacket, brushed off his sleeves, and looked Brandon directly in the eyes. He didn't say a word. Not one single word. Then he turned and walked toward the exit with the same calm dignity he had walked in with. There's something powerful about silence, you know? Sometimes the most devastating thing you can do is say nothing at all. And that's exactly what Daniel did as he walked through that ballroom with wine dripping from his suit. Every step he took was measured, controlled. His shoulders were back, his head was high, and his face showed nothing. No anger, no embarrassment, nothing. But inside? Oh, inside, he was making decisions that would change everything. People parted like the Red Sea as he walked past. Some looked ashamed, like they knew something wrong had just happened. Others looked curious, pulling out their phones to catch video of the man who got wine poured on him walking out like a king leaving his throne room. A server near the door whispered to another, "Did you see his face?" He didn't even react. The other server whispered back, "That's not normal. People don't walk like that unless they're somebody." Daniel heard them, but didn't acknowledge it. He pushed through the double doors and stepped into the hallway. The noise from the ballroom faded behind him, replaced by the quiet hum of hotel air conditioning and distant elevator music. The hallway was cooler.
Calmer.
Daniel took a long, slow breath, feeling the wine-soaked fabric stick to his skin. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen lit up his face in the dim hallway light. He scrolled to a contact labeled simply "Office" and pressed call. One ring. That's all it took. "Mr. Brooks." A woman's voice answered, crisp and professional. "How can I help you?" Daniel's voice came out quiet but absolutely firm. "Cancel the Silverstone deal. Every part of it. Pull all funding. Lock down every account connected to this partnership. And I want it announced immediately." There was a pause. Not hesitation, just processing. "Understood, sir. Should I notify the legal team?" "Already done," Daniel said. Make sure the announcement goes out while they're still celebrating. I want them to feel it in real time. Consider it handled. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Down the hall, an elevator dinged. An older couple stepped out, dressed for the gala. They saw Daniel and the wine stain covering his chest, and their eyes went wide. The woman whispered, "Isn't that the man from the ballroom? I saw it on someone's Instagram story already." The man shook his head slowly. They poured wine on him like he was nothing, treated him like trash. Daniel walked past them with a slight nod. Nothing more. He pressed the elevator button and waited, hands in his pockets, staring at his reflection in the polished metal doors. The reflection stared back.
Calm. Certain.
Ready. When the elevator arrived, he stepped inside alone. The doors closed, sealing him in soft music and silence. He loosened his ties slightly, feeling the wet fabric pull against his neck. The smell of wine filled the small space. His phone buzzed. A text message from his assistant. Legal team confirmed. All actions initiated. Announcement prepared. Awaiting your final confirmation. Daniel typed back one word, send. The elevator descended slowly, floor by floor. Daniel watched the numbers light up above the door.
10, 9, 8.
Each floor marking a second closer to the moment everything would change for Brandon and Catherine Silverstone. When the doors opened to the lobby, the scene was entirely different from the chaos upstairs. Down here, people milled about casually. Hotel guests checking in. Business travelers grabbing coffee. A pianist played soft jazz in the corner lounge. But even here, Daniel felt eyes on him. A young woman at the concierge desk stared at the wine stain, then quickly looked away when he caught her watching. Two men in business suits stopped their conversation mid-sentence, watching him walk past. One of them muttered, "That's the guy from the gala. I saw the video. They absolutely destroyed him up there." The other man replied, "Yeah, but look at how he's walking. Something's off. You don't move like that if you're defeated." Daniel pushed through the main doors and stepped outside into the Chicago night. The air hit him cold and sharp, cutting through the wine-soaked fabric. Street lights glowed orange against the dark sky. Cars passed in steady streams, headlights painting the road. A valet rushed toward him. "Mr. Brooks, can I get your car for you?" Daniel raised a hand gently. "I'll walk." "Thank you." The valet looked confused, but stepped back. "Of course, sir. Have a good evening." Daniel started down the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, breath visible in the cold air. Behind him, the Royal Gardens Hotel rose into the sky, its windows glowing with warm light. From here, he could see the ballroom on the third floor, the silhouettes of people moving behind the glass. His phone vibrated again. Another message. Announcement sent. Response incoming. Daniel stopped at the corner, looking back one last time at the hotel. He could almost picture what was happening up there right now. The screens flickering, the music stopping, the confused faces turning to panic. He imagined Brandon's smile finally cracking, Catherine's confident posture crumbling, the room that had been full of laughter and celebration suddenly filling with shock and fear. And then, right on cue, he saw it. The ballroom lights flickered. Through the windows, he could see movement changing from casual celebration to frantic confusion. People gathering in clusters. Phones lifting to ears. Hands waving in animated conversation. It had begun. Daniel turned away from the hotel and continued walking down the street. The city moved around him, completely unaware that a $600 million deal had just exploded 3 floors up. Taxis honked. People laughed outside restaurants. Life continued like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Daniel walked into the night, leaving behind the chaos he had created with a single phone call. His suit was ruined.
His dignity had been attacked.
But his power? His power was just getting started. Back in that ballroom, reality hit like a freight train nobody saw coming. The music stopped first. Right in the middle of a violin solo, it just stopped. The silence that followed felt thick enough to touch. People looked around, confused, trying to figure out what happened. Then the screens went dark. All those massive displays showing the Silverstone Tech logo just went black. The host on stage froze with his microphone halfway to his mouth, his smile stuck on his face like a mask. A man in a gray suit came running through the crowd, phone pressed against his ear, his face going from confused to absolutely terrified in about 3 seconds. He rushed straight to the stage and grabbed the host's arm, pulling him aside to whisper something urgent. The host's face went completely white. Brandon noticed the commotion. He was still near where he'd poured the wine, still surrounded by people congratulating him on handling the situation. "What's going on?" he called out, irritation in his voice. The host turned toward him, and you could see the man was struggling to speak. "Mr. Silverstone, the deal, it's been suspended." For a moment, nobody moved. The word suspended hung in the air like smoke. Then the room exploded. "Suspended," someone shouted. "What do you mean suspended? You can't suspend a $600 million deal in the middle of the celebration. Who authorized this?" The host looked like he wanted to disappear. "The order came from the top. From the partner company. It's final." Brandon's face turned red. He pushed through the small crowd around him and got right in the host's face. "Final? I am the top. I'm the CEO. Who gave this order?" The host actually stepped backward. "The directive came from the investment partner, sir. They've locked down everything." Catherine rushed over, her gold dress swishing around her legs. "This is a mistake. Call them back. Fix this right now." But phones were already buzzing all around the room. Executives and board members pulled out their devices, and you could see their faces changing as they read message after message. Bad news spreading like wildfire. An older man in a tuxedo looked up from his phone, his face pale. "All our accounts, every account connected to this deal, they're frozen."
Where innovation
A woman
meets
nearby
sustainability.
gasped, staring at her screen. "The investors are pulling out. Every single one. My entire portfolio just went red." Another voice from across the room. "Our stock is crashing. Look at this. We've lost 40% in the last 3 minutes." Panic rippled through the ballroom like dominoes falling. People started talking over each other, voices rising, some shouting, some whispering in horror. The servers stood frozen against the walls, not knowing whether to stay or leave. Then someone near the entrance held up their phone. "Oh my God. You need to see this." A small crowd gathered around the phone. On the screen was a video that had already gone viral. The clip showed Brandon pouring wine on Daniel. You could see Catherine laughing. You could hear their mocking words. And you could see Daniel's calm face as he walked away. The caption read, "Billionaire humiliated at his own deal signing." They had no idea who he was. The video spread through the room like a virus. Phone to phone. Screen to screen. Within seconds, it seemed like everyone had seen it. "Wait," a young woman said, her voice shaking. "That man they poured wine on, who is he?" An older executive looked up from his phone, his face gray. "His name is Daniel Brooks." "Who's that?" someone asked. The executive's voice came out as barely a whisper. "He owns Midwest Solar Energy. The entire company. He's the partner. He's the one funding this deal." You could have heard a pin drop. Catherine grabbed Brandon's arm so hard her knuckles went white. "Tell me that's not true." But Brandon was staring at his own phone now, reading something that made his face drain of all color. "It's true. He owns the entire partnership company. All of it." A board member pushed through the crowd, his face twisted in anger and fear. "Do you understand what you've done? Do you have any idea what you've done?" Brandon couldn't speak. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. The board member's voice rose. "You just humiliated the man funding our entire expansion. $600 million. Thousands of jobs. Our future. And you poured wine on him like he was a servant." Catherine pressed her hand to her forehead, her perfectly styled hair falling across her face. "We didn't know," she whispered. "We didn't know who he was." "That's the problem," the board member shouted. "You didn't care who he was. You saw someone you thought was beneath you, and you treated him like garbage." Around them, the gala was falling apart. Guests were leaving, some running for the exits. Others stood in clusters, recording everything, posting to social media. The servers had abandoned their trays. The host had disappeared completely. Another alert flashed across the big screens that had come back to life. This time it showed a news headline: Silverstone tech deal cancelled. Partnership terminated by investor after public humiliation. Beneath it, a statement from Daniel's company: Midwest Solar Energy has terminated all partnerships with Silverstone Tech Industries effective immediately. This decision is final and non-negotiable. Brandon sank into the nearest chair, his head in his hands. Catherine stood frozen, her gold dress suddenly looking ridiculous in the harsh reality of what they'd done. Someone in the crowd whispered, "I told you he didn't walk like staff." Another voice answered, "Rich people never expect the quiet ones to have real power." By midnight, the ballroom was nearly empty. Broken champagne glasses sat on tables. Abandoned phones lay scattered on chairs. The celebration had turned into a funeral, and everyone knew it. Outside, the Chicago night continued on, completely indifferent to the empire that had just crumbled on the third floor of the Royal Gardens Hotel. Morning came cruel and unforgiving for Brandon and Catherine Silverstone. The sun rose over Chicago like it always did, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Beautiful and peaceful. But there was no peace inside the Silverstone penthouse. Catherine sat at the kitchen counter, still wearing yesterday's makeup, smudged and running down her face. Her gold dress from the night before lay crumpled on the floor where she'd stepped out of it hours ago. She stared at her phone, scrolling through headline after headline, each one worse than the last. Silverstone Tech loses $600 million deal after CEO humiliates partner. Stock plummets 70% overnight in historic collapse. Billionaire Daniel Brooks cuts ties after public disrespect. The video had gone completely viral. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. None of them kind. People were dissecting every second of that wine pour, every word of mockery, every moment of their arrogance. Brandon paced the living room, his phone pressed to his ear, making call after call. But every conversation ended the same way. "We're pulling our investment. We can't be associated with this. Don't contact us again."
Click, click, click.
By 10 in the morning, they had lost 17 major investors. By noon, 3 board members had resigned. By 2 in the afternoon, the company's lawyers were sending emails about potential bankruptcy. Catherine's voice came out broken and small. "We have to talk to him." Brandon stopped pacing. "What?" "Daniel. We have to talk to Daniel. Apologize. Beg if we have to." Her hands were shaking. "If we don't, everything we built is gone. Everything." Brandon wanted to argue. His pride wanted to fight back. But he looked around at their expensive penthouse, at the life they'd built, and he knew she was right. Without this deal, without investors, without the partnership, they had nothing. They drove to Daniel's neighborhood in silence. It was nothing like they expected. No mansion, no gates, no security guards. Just a quiet street in a middle-class area with small houses and old trees. Daniel's home was modest. A simple 2-story house with a small porch. A garden in front with flowers Catherine didn't know the names of. A car in the driveway that was nice but not flashy. This man could have lived anywhere. Could have bought any house. But he chose this. Brandon knocked on the door, his hand trembling slightly. Daniel opened it after a moment. He wore jeans and a simple t-shirt. His expression was calm, unchanged, like he'd been expecting them. Catherine spoke first, her voice cracking. "We were wrong. We were so wrong. We treated you like you were nothing, and we're sorry. Please let us make this right." Brandon added, his voice weak, "We've lost everything. Our investors are gone. Our board is falling apart. Just give us a chance to fix this. One chance." Daniel stood in the doorway, not inviting them in, not stepping aside. He just looked at them with those calm eyes, the same eyes that had watched them pour wine on him without flinching. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but every word landed like a hammer. "You didn't lose everything today. You lost at the moment you decided that people's worth came from how they looked, or how they dressed, or whether you recognized them." Catherine wiped tears from her face. We didn't know who you were. Daniel's expression didn't change. That's exactly the problem. You didn't know who I was, so you decided I was nobody. You built a whole world where you could treat people like trash if they didn't meet your standards of importance. Brandon swallowed hard. Is there anything we can do? Anything at all? Daniel shook his head once slowly. The deal is gone. The trust is gone. And my door is closed. Please, Catherine whispered. We're begging you. Daniel stepped back slightly, his hand on the door. You know what's sad? If I had walked in there wearing a more expensive suit, if I had announced myself with bodyguards, if I had made a show of my wealth, you would have treated me completely differently. Not because I was a better person, just because I looked like your definition of success. He paused, letting that sink in. You taught me something last night. You taught me that the partnership I was about to sign would have been built on a foundation of disrespect, of judgment, of people who care more about appearances than character. And I don't build businesses with people like that. Brandon's shoulders slumped. All the fight went out of him. Daniel's final words came soft but absolute. Walk carefully from now on. The world is smaller than you think, and people remember how you made them feel. He stepped back and closed the door. Not a slam, just a quiet, final click. Brandon and Catherine stood on that porch for a long moment, staring at the closed door. Then they turned and walked back to their car. They drove home in silence. There was nothing left to say. Meanwhile, Daniel went back to his living room where his laptop sat open on the coffee table. He had 3 other partnership offers waiting in his inbox. Companies that had heard about what happened and wanted to work with someone who valued respect and dignity.
His phone rang.
It was his assistant. Mr. Brooks, the press wants a statement about the Silverstone situation. Daniel thought for a moment. Tell them this. Midwest Solar Energy builds partnerships based on mutual respect and shared values. We're excited to move forward with partners who understand that how you treat people matters more than anything else. Perfect, sir. Also, the mayor's office called. They want to discuss a new citywide solar initiative. Daniel smiled slightly. Set up a meeting. He ended the call and looked out his window at the quiet street. Kids were playing basketball in a driveway across the road. An older couple walked their dog. Normal life. Real life. This was where he chose to be. Not in a penthouse looking down on people, but here, on the ground, where he could remember what actually mattered. Respect.
Dignity.
Treating every person like they matter. Because everyone does. And the people who forget that, well, they learn eventually. Sometimes the hard way. The story spread far beyond that one night. The video was watched millions of times. News outlets picked it up. Business schools started using it as a case study about corporate ethics and the cost of arrogance. Brandon and Catherine's company never recovered. Within 6 months, Silverstone Tech Industries filed for bankruptcy. Their name became a warning to others. Treat people with respect, or watch your empire crumble. Daniel's company? It grew. He partnered with cities across the country, bringing clean energy to communities that needed it most. He hired people from all backgrounds, caring more about their character than their credentials. And he never forgot that night. Not because of what they did to him, but because of what it reminded him. True power isn't in humiliating others. It's in how you respond when others try to humiliate you. It's in walking away with your dignity intact. It's in making decisions based on your values, not your emotions. It's in remembering that every person deserves respect, whether they're wearing a tuxedo or a work uniform. That's the real power. The kind that lasts. The kind that builds something meaningful. And that's the story of the night Daniel Brooks walked out of a ballroom with wine on his suit and destroyed an empire without saying a word. Remember, how you treat people when you think they don't matter shows exactly who you are. And sooner or later, the world finds out.